Who doesn't want to be making 5 figures per month teaching the very thing they love the most? For some of us, that's piano or online business. It could be losing weight, yoga, becoming a freelance bookkeeper. The niches and topics are endless. And today, you learn about how someone took his love of beer and turned it into a profitable course business, teaching others about his favorite drink. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, it's Jacques, and this is the Online Course Show. I'm pumped to have you joining me here today. You know, I'm always amazed by all the cool niches that y'all are in. The niche I got started in is pretty mainstream, learning piano and going through a curriculum to learn piano. It's pretty common, but your niche doesn't have to be mainstream. And my guest today is in a niche I didn't know existed until I met him. Chris Cohen is what's known as a certified Cicerone. Some of you may be familiar with the term sommelier, who is someone with expert knowledge in wine, and they often work at a nice restaurant giving you wine recommendations. Well, a Cicerone is very similar, but for beer. And there are different levels of Cicerones, and Chris is a certified advanced Cicerone, of which there are only about 180 in the entire world. So all of that brings me to Chris's niche, which is helping people pass the Cicerone certification exam. And you can find Chris over at thebeerscholar.com. That's thebeerscholar.com. In this conversation, you'll learn about the 3 levels of Cicerone certification and how Chris crafted an offer for each of the levels. You'll learn about how he started with ebooks years ago and found some initial success with that, but why he pivoted to courses instead for this niche. And you'll learn about why he nearly quit the business entirely and went back to his day job about a year ago. Let's get into it. Chris Cohen, welcome to the Online Course Show.
Thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
I'm over 200 episodes in on this podcast, over 7 years. I'm about to do something I don't think I've ever done on here. In fact, I know I've never done on here. Yeah. And I'm gonna crack open a beer while we talk.
Excellent.
I feel like that's appropriate for your niche. Are you doing it as well?
I am indeed. I've got a Spaten. It's a Munich Helles. It's really kind of it's the beer that all the like kind of big industrial lagers are based on. It's the German, it's kind of like the OG German pale lager.
Okay. I knew maybe half of the words you just said. I am very much not a beer connoisseur. Very rarely drink it. But it's an honor to share a beer with you over on this podcast, virtually.
Cheers to that.
So cheers. And I'm drinking it out of my... What do you call this glass here? It's got my name on it. It says Jacques right on here. It's a long story about how I got this glass.
That's fun. Yeah, it's kind of like a Belgian tulip or something you would call it. It's
sure.
Kind of chalice-like.
Well, look, I'm going to tell you what I'm drinking here in a minute, but before people get too confused, we'll explain why beer is relevant here. So what exactly is your niche that you teach online?
Yeah, so I've got like a pretty fun and unique niche. I teach people to pass the Cicerone certification exams, and you can think of the Cicerone certifications as essentially the same as like sommelier, the Master Court of Sommelier certifications, but for beer people. And
just in case anybody doesn't know what that is, that's the wine. Like, how do you describe a sommelier?
Right.
It's obviously for wine, but like wine, what?
Like wine wizards. Like if you meet a master sommelier, they're like a 10th level wine wizard. They're like the super science of wine. So it's the same thing for the Cicerone program with beer. There are only 28 master Cicerones in the world. There are about 180 advanced Cicerones. That's what I am. There's about 45 or 4,600 certified. That's the second level. And most of those people actually have used my study and prep material to pass that exam, like the majority of them. Because I've been teaching people to beat these exams for about a decade. So wow, I basically do beer education. And I started this company, Beer Scholar, about a decade ago as kind of a side gig, because I took the exam and I was kind of frustrated with the lack of like prep material out there. It was like this very confusing process. So I kind of like identified this, gap in the market. And for me, I was thinking at the time, like, well, this is just going to be a side gig. I'll make this study guide. And it was like a PDF file, and I made a website, and I just put it out there, and it actually sold really well for several years. But as you can imagine, a PDF file is very easy to share. So after a few years, that business really kind of tanked because, it's a tight industry. It's a small industry. The little Cicerone world is pretty small, and everybody shared this stuff, which is fine. I wasn't that worried about it. I was working in the industry doing other stuff. But at some point, a few years ago, I decided to go all in on Beer Scholar and take it to the next level and do actual online courses and coaching programs for the higher level exams. So that is, when we cross paths.
Yeah. So look, you said you're in beer education. I want to talk to you a little bit kind of high level about what you're really helping people to accomplish, because in my opinion, it's one thing to set out and educate people about beer, right? Mm-hmm. But you're actually promoting an outcome of passing the Cicerone certification exams, right?
Right.
Don't you think that you're significantly more niched down than just beer education? And how important to your business do you think it is that you have that tangible outcome for people of actually passing the exam?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Obviously, it's very nichey. I'm not just doing funsy kind of surface level education stuff for the general public. What I'm doing is real geek stuff. And, what that means, though, is that my courses and coaching programs are very valuable to these people because it's going to help their careers, right? So it's not just for funsies. It's like career enhancing. They're going to end up making more money, having better careers, which allows me to, of course, actually ask them to pay a decent amount for these courses.
Yeah, because I talk a lot about, information versus transformation. And you can certainly put out a lot of informational courses on something like beer. And I'm sure plenty exist. I'm sure plenty of YouTube channels exist, and so on. But let's talk about why this certification is so important, why people want to get it. You just mentioned more money, advancing careers, right? What is where does this typical Cicerone work, and what does that look like for them?
Yeah. So, the first level is this very easy online exam, and a lot of like tap rooms, breweries, bars, companies that sell beer in any capacity or which do beer service, they often will require everyone on staff to have that level of knowledge. And I have a course for that, but it's just like a very inexpensive kind of quick course. My main focus is on my second level course. People who do that are people who are really, I would say, pretty excited about beer, thirsty for knowledge, just really are into it. Like, these aren't people who are like passing through the beer industry or like bartending while they attend college. These are like people who are serious about beer. And there certainly are some people who do it straight up to enhance their career, but there's always, I would say almost everybody is also just very interested in beer. It's making beer is this very complex, biochemical process that's kind of very exciting to a lot of people who are into like engineering and science really enjoy that. I think that's one thing that grabs a lot of people, and gets them really interested in it. That's what got me into it was homebrewing. I used to be an attorney, and I got into beer to the extent that I switched careers, which, questionable decision, but so, it's crazy to me. So the Cicerone program's been around for, I don't know, 20 years. There's still only like 4,500 or so certified Cicerones in the world. And, they're very beer smart. They know a ton about beer, and it's huge for their careers. I'm actually shocked that more people don't do it in the industry. And I see it almost as part of my job, as like a side piece of my job to actually promote that program.
Interesting. So these say 4,500 or so certified Cicerones level 2 that you say, like, the majority of them, is Cicerone kind of their job title, or this certification just something they have on their resume and they're a high level waiter, bartender, owner, brewer, something like that?
Yeah, maybe any of those things, but they're probably the kind of people who are going into management positions at beer companies or distributors. They might work for big beer companies. These are the kind of certifications that can help you get like those better paying jobs in the beer industry that come with benefits and like a career path. So, certainly there are people who are doing bartending and sales gigs that have these certifications, but they're probably, in the long term going to be moving up in the industry.
Now, I've had a few people on the podcast that teach, like, passing an exam, getting some sort of certification. I had on somebody years ago who taught people to pass the PMP exam, project management professional.
Right.
I think Jason Dion. He helped people with some certifications in IT security. Just to give a couple of examples, what do you think the difference is when you're working on an online course that is, and maybe you've never done it not helping somebody with their certification, but from what you've seen, what's the difference with your course when you're trying to help somebody get a certification?
Well, there's real focus, right? I mean, I know exactly what I need to teach these folks. Their goal is to pass this exam. I can teach them all kinds of stuff about beer, but the courses are very focused on getting them past these exams. So what I teach is not just the stuff they need to know about beer. It's also everything they need to know to beat the exam. Passing a hard exam is, I think, knowing how to approach the exam to beat it is half the battle, right? And the certified Cicerone exam, even just that second level, actually has a lower pass rate than the California bar exam for attorneys, for instance.
Wow.
So these are not easy tests. Another thing that's nice about it is I know exactly who my audience is. It's, like you said, very niche-y. It's kind of a small community. People in it know who I am, and they can find me pretty easily. I've been doing it for a long time, and so I'm kind of a known quantity in that world. So it affects the course material and provides me with focus on what to teach. It also affects my marketing because I know exactly who my audience is. They know who I am. I know how to reach them. They can find me pretty easily. What I do is I've really created my own, world. I'm like blue ocean. What is that whole thing about there? What I do is I'm the only guy out there doing what I do.
I mean, are you being for real? Like, if somebody wants to get one of these certifications, are you really the only option?
I mean, they can do it on their own, but the pass rate for even the second level is like under 40%. And I'm the first person who put out study material for that level. And about a year ago, I launched the first coaching program for the third level, which is an exam that has a pass rate under 10%.
But when you say they could do it on their own, where do they even go? How do they learn how to pass the exam?
Exactly. It's challenging. That's why I started Beer Scholar, because when I studied for the certified Cicerone exam myself back in like 2011 or 12 or whatever it was, I found it to be a very frustrating process. And certainly since then, there have been other resources that have come out on the market. But, if you want it all organized in one place, everything you need to know for the test at the exact like depth of knowledge that you want it, and you want to do it the quickest, easiest possible way, you have to I'm the best option.
As far as the content of your courses go, I can understand how, like, the logistics of the test and tricks and tips and things like that go. But as far as the actual beer goes, like, how are you able to do that with an online course?
Right. So that is That is part of the challenge. So these exams have two parts. There's a written exam, and then there's an in-person tasting exam. The written exam you can do online now, which is quite nice. The tasting exam is obviously more difficult for me to train people for, right? Because I can't sit there with them. What I do though is I have a weekly tasting and Q&A that I do for all my students. And I tell everyone, we're doing, Munich Helles. That's why I actually have these, because I did a Munich Helles tasting last night. And, we dig into the style. Everybody gets one of the classic versions. There's this, the Beer Judge Certification Program style guidelines are this thing. They list some of the classic examples. I say, bring one of these to the class, and everyone does. And then we break the style down. So they're tasting it with me live. We're doing sensory analysis on it. I'm helping them learn how to do evocative descriptions. And then we end up going off on all kinds of tangents about how that beer's made, what kind of processes and techniques are used to make it, what ingredients are used to make it, how does it fit into the rainbow of beer from that culture? What's the history of the beer? What would you pair this with, food wise, all that stuff. So I teach them all that. And I also teach them to identify all these different off flavors, which is all part of the in-person tasting exam. So it is a little more challenging for me to teach that stuff, but I think I've got it pretty well figured out as much as possible without being in person with the folks.
How have you been able to separate kind of the work from pleasure? I noticed that once piano became more of my job, I kind of enjoyed it a little less, and because it was kind of like work. Do you still just enjoy having a beer casually?
Yeah. So definitely feel you on that. When you go through the process of learning all this stuff and doing all these exams, and then turn that into a job too, obviously, I wouldn't say that there's any less joy, but it does change from just pure fun to kind of a job, right? And it does become, like I have not committed to and started prepping for the master exam, because I do feel kind of like, Jesus, how much more beer stuff can I do with my life? How much more do I need to learn about this? I may do it one day, but I do feel you on that. Yeah, I do. What I will say is this: I enjoy beer more now than I ever did. Just having a beer and knowing a lot about it, and being, understanding it the way I do, being able to taste it the way I do. I appreciate it more than ever. And I say that very specifically. I want to point that out because there are all these people out there who say like, oh, you guys are just intellectualizing this everyman's drink. Why can't you just relax, whatever? And it's like, oh, but you think it's like totally cool for wine to be that way. Like, I don't understand that. And the weird thing is, you'll even hear that from people in the industry sometimes. But my thought is that that's like defensive.
I want to jump back to some of your backstory next, but let me share with you what I'm drinking here. This is my favorite beer, which is, like I said, not saying a lot. Okay, it's a French beer. You may recognize it. It's 1664, but it's the white beer. It's the Blanc.
Yeah. Oh, the Blanc. Cool.
The Blanc. Yeah. So, I don't know how much you're judging me right now, but I really like it as far as beer goes.
This is a no judgment zone. This is actually one of the things that I have been saying since the day I started Beer Scholar, and even before that, when I started a homebrew club in San Francisco and all that. The whole point of the craft beer movement, right? Like, I think a lot of people felt like it was very punk rock, and like there was like a lot of gatekeeping back in the day. Like even the branding, it was like, you're not tough enough to drink this super bitter beer, right? And I hated all that. I think the whole point of it was always to bring great beer to the people. And that, I think of myself as like the anti-gatekeeper. I want people to enjoy beer however they enjoy it.
Yeah, but look, if I was drinking like a Natty Light or a Busch Light or something, surely there'd be some judgment right now.
There's a time and place for every beer. I love those kind of beers. If it's a sunny day and I'm chilling by the pool, I'm probably drinking, Natty Light or something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Very relatable. All right, let's jump
Wide
back
open.
in time, Chris. You said you were an attorney, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about when the idea of becoming a Cicerone yourself first crept in for you.
Yeah. So I went to school in New York City for law. I practiced there for a few years, didn't really love it, wanted to just get a change of scenery, moved to San Francisco without much of a plan, no job waiting for me, kind of crazy. And I ended up doing law work there because, that's what I was obviously trained for. I was looking for other stuff, but I ended up in law again. And while I was working in law, I just got into beer. The first person I met in San Francisco just happened to be this guy who was a beer writer, like a guy who wrote books about beer. And he introduced me to this world. And I was really lucky. It was just so random. I was very lucky. He was just kind of this guy who knew lots of people in that world in the early days ish of craft beer. So like 2008, that craft beer wasn't like huge back then, I mean, don't say that to like folks who were doing the business like 10 years earlier than that, but it hadn't exploded yet. So I felt like I was in this cool little world. I got this introduction to this cool little world. The thing that really got me, so I started homebrewing. I kind of mentioned before that I just was excited by brewing and, that sort of biochemical process and making beer. I thought that was really neat. But the thing that really got me was I went to a tasting once at this bottle shop, and it was all barrel aged beers. It was one of the first time I'd had those. And so what we're talking about here is like mixed fermentation beers, which are these like super funky, crazy Belgian beers. And then also these like bourbon barrel aged stouts. So it was all these kind of intense, super crazy beers. And the guy who was the buyer at the shop who was putting on the tasting, the way he was talking about the beer, I was just like blown away by all his knowledge, all the descriptors he had, the way he was comparing them to each other. I just was like, I didn't even know that you could know these things about beer. I didn't know beer could go like that deep. And it really felt awesome to me. So I went up to him afterwards and I was like, how did you learn all that? And he was like, oh, I recently passed the certified Cicerone exam. I'd never heard of that. I'm like probably all your guests or all your listeners. I was like, what the heck is that? He's like, oh, he told me about it. He's like, you could definitely do it. It's not that hard. Let me know if you need any help. So, when I left that tasting, I knew I was going to do this. And it took me like maybe a year or two to get around to doing it. I was still practicing law. I was homebrewing a lot. I had launched a homebrew club in San Francisco that was very popular. And so I was just kind of like doing events. I was doing all this beer stuff, in the scene. I eventually did pass the certified Cicerone exam. I became a national rank BJCP judge, beer judge. And eventually I met a few people who wanted to open a bar with me. And so so that was my big career change. I went from practicing law to opening a bar. And Beer Scholar was just like this side business that I had put together. Threw up a website, created this study guide. Actually did make, I think in the first year that I had that out, I think I made like 80 grand from like a $50 study guide. So it was quite popular and it got out there. But after a few years, like I said, that business started sort of petering out. And the bar, everyone knows what happened to bars during COVID. It was a brutal period of time. I was kind of ready to move on after COVID was over. Saved the bar, pivot, crazy amounts of work for very little money. I was like, all right, I did that. Did that business. Time to move on. And so I moved to Portland, Oregon to kind of like physically remove myself from that business. And at that point, I went all in on Beer Scholar to turn it into an online course business instead of that like janky side business PDF file study guide thing.
When you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you personally saw kind of the hole in the market and the opportunity when you went to study for this and there wasn't much help out there. And that's kind of how this thing, the Beer Scholar, got started.
Right.
Around what time frame is this that we're talking about?
So I think I was studying for that exam. Maybe it was 2012, 2013. I passed in, I want to say 2013 or 14. I launched Beer Scholar in 2014 and I did a Kickstarter. Remember when Kickstarter was like, not.
I haven't heard about Kickstarter in a while. I'm sure it's
Right.
still a thing.
It's still a thing. And crowdfunding is really just what people say now. Right. But Kickstarter was one of the first like major crowdfunding kind of platforms. And this was before it turned into a thing where, everyone's like doing crowdfunding to pay for their medical bills and stuff. This was like me trying to really feel out the market. Like, is there a market for this before I just go and spend the time to create this? A, is there a market for it? And B, this will help me with marketing. So I put together this Kickstarter, shot a little video about what I was going to do, put it up there. It made like 12 grand. I was like, all right, people are down. People want this. And after the Kickstarter ended, maybe like 6 months later, I delivered all these study guides. Initially, I did it like I printed them out as books. And it was so expensive and so frustrating. The physical product thing, it was just a nightmare. I quickly decided I was going to go ahead and do it digitally. And I did a lot of research, but basically what I found was there was really no way to create a protected file. And maybe that's changed. This was a decade ago. But I went ahead and just said, this isn't my main business. I'm just going to see how this goes. Do a PDF, whatever. And like I said, it went really well for a few years.
So I love that you started on Kickstarter because, we often talk about how it is good to validate your idea. And the only true way to validate your idea is when somebody will pay you money. But it's great if that exchange can happen before you even develop the product, because then you know if you're wasting your time or not. And so by the time you started making the study guide, I'm guessing you already had $12,000 committed to you and you were super motivated to actually make it.
Yeah. Yes. Motivated. And I felt a lot of pressure to deliver, a really good product, but it was great. Another thing you talk about in your coaching is that one of the first steps for most people will be to kind of build traffic, create traffic, get your name out there. And it really helped me do that too, because now I had this basically like website marketing platform I could point people to, with a call to action on it, which was, pay for this thing up front. And yeah, it really worked out. Since I was thinking about it as this little side gig, 12 grand, I was like, wow, this is more than I was hoping for.
Yeah. So look, we got started around the same time. And, obviously then I got started, 2013, we're talking 2014, that time frame, courses were around, but they weren't, nothing like today. Right.
Yeah.
And I would hear a lot more success stories back then about kind of like what you did with PDFs and whatnot. I was an early listener of Pat Flynn's podcast. He had that architecture exam thing that he sold and was wildly successful with. So that was an inspiration. But, I pretty quickly chose online course as my platform for piano, namely because I didn't think I could teach piano with just text and images and whatnot. Right. So way back then, were courses even on your radar?
So they really weren't. Because I was viewing this as something that needed to be a simple side gig, I didn't even really do that research. I didn't look, I was kind of fixated on, I'm going to make a book, kind of a study guide. And so I don't know why I just kind of fixated on that. That seemed like the way to go. Maybe it's because of my background doing like so much post secondary education. I was just used to like making outlines, make notes, make outlines. The online course thing, I don't recall that it even occurred to me, but I can say this for sure. You used like WordPress and stuff, and and you are a tech savvy guy who was able to build this whole platform, build out this website and the sales funnel and stuff. I struggle to do that now with all the tools a decade later. So I would have never been able to do that at the time. And I'm not like, I don't think of myself as particularly tech dumb, but it's complicated. It's a complicated business to tie together all these different platforms to do the selling for you and to have your and to build your course.
Yeah, and I think test prep is typically thought of as kind of a book. I know any right. test I've ever prepped for, I went to the bookstore and bought a book and went through it. So
right.
that makes sense that's kind of what you were always thinking.
Yeah, I was just thinking like, well, I don't know. I studied for the whatever tests to get in the law school and the bar exam and all these things with like, those big fat Princeton review kind of study guide books. So that's just what I'll do. And it was successful. I mean, I still have people email me sometimes asking if they can get that instead of enrolling in my course.
No. And what do you tell them?
No. I mean, I upgraded. I leveled up big time. Like, this course is so much better than that study guide ever was. The reason people are asking me is because it was cheaper. I mean, that's.
So you mentioned, I think you said $80,000 that first year?
It was kind of insane. Yeah. It sold like crazy.
Was that the best year for the study guide?
Yeah. That first like 12 months, maybe 18 months. First 2 years were good. And then it just kind of like proliferated, everywhere. Like
Why?
I would find people like giving it away on their websites and stuff.
Is that why it went downhill?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It was just widely available. Everyone had it, bars and restaurants and breweries, and everybody like had them in like their like group folders and stuff on their servers. And I know that because sometimes they would leave them open to the public even, and I would find them. So yeah, it was just out there.
So did it eventually just go to zero? You're obviously not still making sales of that today because now you have courses, but I mean, eventually did it fizzle all the way to zero?
I don't think it fizzled all the way to zero. Probably in the last couple of years of selling that, it was definitely like, 10, 15, 20 grand, stuff like that. Instead of, it was still significant. I was still happy to be doing it. But when I made the decision to go all in on Beer Scholar, I knew I had to level it up to online courses that were going to be a much fuller experience for my students, and for which had much higher value, so that I could charge more.
Yeah. All right. So lawyer, Cicerone, bar owner, then you decide, okay, I'm going all in on Beer Scholar, which means I'm going all in on courses.
Right.
What happens from there? What's the next thing you do? So just start making courses?
So, yes. So I just, I don't know. I just thought, hey, how hard can this be? I think I had that attitude that probably a lot of people have before they realize how wrong it is, which is, if I build it, they will come. It doesn't really work that way. You say it yourself all the time. You can't just build online courses. You have to build an online course business, right? So
yeah, but look, Chris, like I say that all the time about if you think if you build it, they will come. But like for me, when I got started, like I was a piano nobody, right? I was an electrical engineer. Like I literally had nobody, right?
Yeah.
When you started courses, you had kind of been in the beer industry for a while. Like certainly you had like an email list or something already.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I had like a Facebook group with 10,000 people. I had a couple thousand people following me on Instagram, a couple thousand people following me on YouTube. And so, yes, when I first built the courses, I was selling, some, but it wasn't like make a living. It wasn't like,
Okay.
Big profit, freedom. Um, you know, it wasn't where I needed it to be to make a living. And now it's a harder decision for people because they're showing up on my website and they're seeing a course that they have to pay $500 to enroll in instead of, a $50 or $80 study guide, which is a pretty easy, quick decision, right? So yes, I definitely had this big advantage. People knew who I was, but here's another thing. All those people who had used my material to become certified Cicerones and whatever, they're like in their careers now, but there's this whole new generation of people coming up based on the kind of explosion of craft beer who maybe aren't as familiar with me. So, yeah, it did work, but it wasn't a sustainable, buy a house kind of business. And that's where I want it to be. I want to get to the multiple six figures. And I think that it's going in that direction, and I'm plugging away. But I did struggle for like a good year, doing this on my own with no guidance. And really, if I had not enrolled in your coaching program, I would have a normal job now, and Beer Scholar would once again be my sidekick. No doubt about it.
What would that job be?
What would that job be? I think about it, and I'm not 100% sure. I think it would be cool to make beer, to be in production, but it's also like a very physical job. So, and you know what? I feel a little too old and experienced to be like coming into some entry level job in the beer business now, I'll tell you what I'm not going to do is open another bar.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about your courses and your course offerings. I want to make sure I'm understanding fully the different kind of levels, right? Because you mentioned earlier, I think there's like the bare bones level 1 is the most minimal. You probably charge the least for it. Level 2 is the one that has about 4,500 people, and then after that is advanced, which you are. There's about 180 people, and there's one level more that's master. So essentially 4 levels, right?
Right. So yeah,
which level did your study guide help? And then how do your courses work in relation to the levels?
Yeah. So I made 2 study guides. One was for level 1 and one was for level 2. And then when I launched, did this like kind of relaunch of Beer Scholar and made online courses, I made it's actually a pretty full featured course. For level 1, it's only $50. So very entry level, easy decision for people to make. And, because of the price I sell, those every day. The second level course I sell for $497, as long as people, opt in to get more information. Then they've entered the sales funnel. They get a series of emails with this discounted offer to get the course for $497. And that offer lasts 5 days. The regular price of the course is $790 something. I've had a few people buy it at that price, but that's rare. And then, and that course is a much, much bigger course. It's actually a pretty huge course, I think, in terms of what other people charge for online courses. Just in terms of like the effort I've put into it and the amount of content, it's actually an absolutely screaming deal, and they get to be in this online community with me and all these other beer geeks who are prepping for the exam. They get invites to a weekly tasting with me. I mean, it's a pretty awesome program. And honestly, the people who are in it are stoked and they have amazing results. The level 3 program is pretty new. I started that with a partner another advanced Cicerone, someone who had passed very recently. So this was all like very recent for him, and he's actually studying for the master exam. So we work together to create that coaching program, and he teaches the classes. That program is very high level. It is 6 months of weekly lessons, and then we stick with them until basically they pass. Like we just say a year, but we stick with them until they pass. We just had our first successful student actually get the advanced Cicerone exam just like 2 weeks ago. The program's only like 8 months old or something. That program is, we charge $2,500. And it's, that is some really high level stuff. Those people are going super deep on beer. Like I said, there's only 180 of them in the world. These are people who can really make their own careers. A lot of them are entrepreneurial, or they're kind of like carving out whatever kind of career path they want in the business. I mean, at that level, more than pretty much almost everybody about beer. And that program is rad. It's new, fairly new, and it's been going great. I'm really stoked with it.
What would you say you're struggling with, or what are like some of the harder parts about running an online course business?
So, I think that getting my sales funnel dialed in has been a real challenge. I've been working on that forever. There's so many shiny things to work on. So I've found that kind of time management when I'm trying to work on social media stuff or do podcasts, but also pay attention to all my students, I definitely feel pulled in a lot of directions. I think I always, I have lots of ideas that I want to chase. And sometimes what I've found is I'm bad at just focusing and dialing in and dialing in and dialing in. Instead, I'm like constantly chasing the new shiny thing or this new idea that I've had. I think that's kind of a mistake I've learned over time. I just recently decided to focus more on social media and driving traffic because, like you said, since I already was known in the industry and had some following, I haven't really focused on that. But now that I do have my courses really going well and my sales funnel is working, I am now getting to the point where I'm finally like starting to focus on driving traffic, which is kind of the opposite order than a lot of other people will do things. And that's been challenging for me. I don't love doing social media stuff. I don't love what I do. I feel is not conducive to like posting photos on Instagram with like very little, useful information. So I've struggled a little bit with figuring out how to work in this kind of, 60-second environment. But I think I'm figuring it out. I've started a podcast recently that's been doing well. And, I think for me, long form, deeper conversations, transmitting really good information that's not just soundbite stuff is more what I'm about. But, this is the world we live in. So.
Yeah, I think there's still a time and place for the longer form stuff. I know we've had these conversations before separately. I know you don't consume much of the short form content yourself. Anyway.
Well, it's addictive, isn't it? I consume plenty.
Try not to anyway.
Yeah.
Now, when you're making content, podcasts, YouTube videos, short form content that you love to hate, how do you reconcile like who you're talking to with these different levels of exams that you're helping somebody with? I could envision that being challenging in terms of, well, am I talking to the person that's already a level 2 that really wants to be advanced? Am I talking to a person that just loves beer and maybe is a candidate to be a level 1 Cicerone?
Right.
How do you do that?
So actually, you're touching on something I should have mentioned before when you said, what are some of my biggest challenges? And one of them is really that my business it's complicated because I have multiple programs and courses that I'm trying to sell. So it's not this simple thing where it's like, I've got this one course and maybe there's some upsells or maybe, a different version of the same thing or something like that. But I have found it challenging to basically juggle what you're talking about there. When it comes to social media, though, I don't worry about it too much. I really do focus mostly on what I consider to be my main course, which is that certified level, that second level. Because I think most people who maybe are thinking about level 1, they see that you're a higher level Cicerone. They know you can teach them that material. They're confident in you. I'm not too worried about speaking to them as directly, maybe, as people who are going for level 2. Level 2 is really my bread and butter.
Which part of this whole thing do you enjoy the most?
I enjoy talking to people. I just like working with people. I like geeking out. I love doing sensory stuff. I love doing those live tastings. That's the stuff that really brings me to life. I just enjoy the hell out of that. I just like interacting with people. And the rest of everything I do, I think, is just to create a world in which I can get paid to do that.
Do you prefer it when it's on the inside of a program where somebody's already paid you money, or content marketing, or both?
Oh, I think mostly I enjoy doing it with my enrolled students. Yeah. Like I said, I'm really just getting into more of the content marketing stuff. I think that will be fun, and I haven't dug into it much, to be honest, yet. I think that will be fun. But yeah, the interaction is what I love. So I do love, even if it's over Zoom or whatever, I do love hanging out with my students. Because I'm seeing them get the results, right? I mean, it's rewarding. They're enjoying themselves. I'm enjoying myself. They're getting the results they want. I get amazing testimonials from people. They're definitely enjoying themselves. I mean, we are learning about beer. It's not the worst thing in the world, It's
not the worst thing in the world. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to me about your tech stack and what you've learned about the different software and things available for running a business like this.
Oh man, this is one of those things with the shiny objects. You can chase them all over the place. But yeah, I settled on Kajabi for hosting my website and doing my sales and my sales funnel and my email. I recently switched to School for my community, which SKOOL School. And I think that is vastly superior for hosting my community. I just made that switch recently in the last month, and I've already seen more action in my community on School than I had seen on my Kajabi community, in 1 month on School than I had seen on Kajabi in a year. So crazy cool, that I love, because again, like I said, I love the interaction. I love that my students are super engaged. They're hanging out with each other even. Some of them are meeting in real life. They're forming little study groups. It's rad. Tech stack. So I use Deadline Funnel, Zapier, Kajabi, and School mostly. Yeah, that's pretty much it, actually.
So you're still using a large majority of the features available inside of Kajabi. Just recently pulled out the community, which I did something similar. That's a great move. I'm a big fan of School, but obviously Kajabi still does a lot more than School can do. You have even your whole website is built in Kajabi, right?
Yeah. When I first joined your coaching program, one of the things that really drove me to do that was just I had complete clarity on the fact that I did not understand how to do this sales funnel stuff. I heard about it. I heard about it on your podcast. I was Googling all over, looking for more information on how to do this stuff, what tech I should use to do it. And I was just confused. And, you seemed like you really knew what you were talking about on that front. So that was one of the things that got me to join your coaching program. And one of your recommendations was switching to Kajabi, which I did. And, it's a learning curve for sure, but I got it all dialed. It's working pretty well. Um, I do love school, and I see that they are probably moving in a direction where you will be able to have like free school communities with courses in them that people can purchase. I think when that happens, I'll probably move at least my lower level course just completely over there. I'll probably still use Kajabi as my website host, sales funnel, and checkout page. Maybe we'll see.
So you don't have any of your courses in school. You're just using it for community?
That's actually not totally true. I did move my entire coaching program to school. So
okay, the level 3.
Yeah, the level 3 one is completely on school, and that makes a lot of sense for that one because it's more interactive. It's more of a coaching program. It's not just tons of like pre-recorded lessons, which Kajabi does a really good job of hosting that kind of stuff. So school does pretty good with it. I would say one reason I'm sticking with Kajabi for now is because school has absolutely no way to create like quizzes and tests on it, right? And obviously, since I'm training people for tests, I like to have practice exams and quizzes. And Kajabi actually has a really good setup for that. School has none. And not only do they have none, when I've asked the people who started the company if they were going to work on that, they basically said, nobody likes taking tests. So no, we're not going to do that.
Sure, somebody does.
I mean, I don't remember which one of them it was, but yeah, they basically said in the comments like of a post about like, hey, are you guys going to build like any kind of quiz, stuff in school? They were like, nah, nobody likes that. We're not doing it. And that's fine. I get it. Kajabi has a great system for that. So even my folks in my coaching program do have to go over to Kajabi to take our practice exams.
Okay. Now, did you mention in that thread that you literally are teaching test prep and it's kind of important for your niche?
Yeah. They didn't reply to that directly. And you know what, though? I bet 99% of people who do online courses don't care about,
right?
Because most people aren't teaching to exams.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have any quizzes in either of my businesses.
Yeah.
But to your point, I'm not teaching people to pass an exam.
Yeah. For me, it's really important. Practice exams is a big part of what I do. I tell people like, you're going to go into this test knowing before you even go that you're going to pass, because I have created a bunch of practice exams that are even slightly harder than the real thing. And if you can pass them, you will pass the real thing.
So Chris, talk to me a little bit about just kind of your day to day. If somebody's on the outside looking in, wondering, somebody like yourself, like where are you spending your time? What does an average day for you, average working day look like for you?
Oh man. I'm still in a building phase. I'm still seated at my desk all day, doing, whatever projects I'm working on for my business. I look very much forward to the day when I don't have to do that as much and maybe can hire some help. But I look like, I think, your typical work from home kind of person. I get up in the morning, do my morning routine, sit down at my desk. I've got like, all this stuff for making video and podcast content all around me. So I am, ready to do all my online lessons. I'm ready to record stuff for social media. But yeah, I like I said, these days I'm kind of focusing on driving traffic, and I've been going through your social media masterclass with Allie in your program. So I'm really kind of trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to tackle social media, and that's my big job right now.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm stoked to be at that point in the arc of my business. And, like I said, I also really love the teaching. So I look forward to that. I do that about 2 nights a week, or sometimes during the day. And I get to have a beer with my students. So that's maybe the highlight for me. It's not the highest pressure job in the world. I mean, I enjoy my life. I'm going to New Orleans for a month in another week or so, and that was kind of always the dream, was like create this job where I have a lot of freedom and am also doing well financially.
That's amazing. Yeah, hopefully we'll get to catch up in person here shortly once you're down in my neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Technically, you've only been doing courses a couple of years now, but technically you started the brand and started generating a following a decade ago. You've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
When we really look
crazy.
at it. Yeah. I mean, if you were, a lot of people that listen to the podcast they're kind of on the sidelines, just like they want to start something, but they haven't yet. Right. So somebody like you, like if you were starting today, what are some of the steps you would take knowing what you know now?
All right. So one thing I will just point out right out of the gate is that when you do a little thing over and over for a really long time, you end up with like a huge amount of stuff after a while, right? You build your skills, you build your content, whatever. Like for you, Jacques, you've got, podcast, 200 episodes of this podcast, right? Going back years. I've got videos on YouTube that go back years. Because even though I didn't have any kind of serious plan for tackling social media, I was just making content. I was putting, I have blog posts on my website from like 2014, 2015, right? And my point is not that, hey, you're too late to the game, listener. Sorry. The point is start now and just start doing it, because next thing you know, a decade will go by and you'll be making a living. Well, hopefully it doesn't take them a decade, but what I'm getting at though is just doing that little thing on a regular basis. It's like the whole habit thing, right? You become that person over time. So for me, even though I wasn't very serious about this business, it did make a name for me over time, and it opened the door for me to do what I'm doing today. When I wanted to rebrand or relaunch Beer Scholar into this online course business, it was less difficult for me probably than someone starting from scratch. If I was starting today, yeah, I don't know. If I was starting from scratch, that's tough. I think, I do feel like being an expert in the thing that you do is really important. I see a lot of this talk out there about setting yourself up to appear to be an expert by doing certain things on social media and this and that. But what's actually pretty clutch is to be an expert. I'm sorry, but I do hear a lot of that kind of talk about like establishing, what's the terminology? Like establishing your,
authority?
Authority. Yeah. It's helpful to actually have the authority because you are an actual expert, but you also build expertise over time doing that little by little thing, right? So, for me, like, I feel like I'm an expert in beer stuff, and I've got the certifications to prove it. And I've got years and years of teaching other people to pass these exams. Like it's straightforward that I'm in authority. And it took time. It took time to do that. So again, I'm kind of getting right back to what I was saying before is just get started. I think that's sort of sounds trite, but get started, find that thing that lights you up, that you're super passionate about, and dive into it.
Yeah, get started and be consistent. You said, do the thing, keep doing the thing. And it kind of sounded like you're talking about content marketing of some sort, right? Blog posts, podcasts, social media, YouTube, something like that, putting out free content. And if you start and you're consistent with it, then it might take a few months. It might take a few years.
Oh, totally. Some people get lucky and they blow up. Some people have amazing personalities that just work really well for doing social media of different types. But so yes, that's true. I am saying start creating content and putting yourself out there and building your expertise. You don't have to pretend to be an expert. You don't have to trick anyone into thinking you're an expert. You can just go out there, be humble, and say, I'm here to learn. And, I can teach things, as long as you're kind of, one book ahead of everyone else, you can start teaching. I think that talking to people, I do, you say it, I think you just had an episode about podcasting come out.
Mm-hmm.
I think podcasting is so amazing. I love podcasting. I love long form content on YouTube. These things just have like a super long tail. I would encourage people, you can build an audience faster by doing reels and doing Instagram and stuff. But, for the most part, you're only as good as whatever you put out last week. But like with YouTube and podcasting, it's out there forever. I mean, even blogging, like I said, I still get like amazing SEO on my website because I've been writing about beer on my website for a decade.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word expert several times. That can be a tricky word. You also mentioned, staying one step ahead. I think truly the credentials come when you help other people get the result that you're trying to help them with, right? Because you are no doubt an expert in your field. There's no doubt about it. You've got the literal certifications to prove it, right? I'm not a piano expert. Yeah. You know what I mean? Well, like there's millions of people better at piano than me.
And we've all had professors, who have PhDs who are awful teachers, right? So it's not always about being, I'm not a master Cicerone, right? I could be even more expert. I could be even more authoritative. But I am way ahead of 99.9% of folks. And I built that knowledge over a really long time and all those connections in the industry, by just being part of it, networking, being in touch with folks, building my knowledge by reading constantly, by doing these exams, by talking to other people who were ahead of me to understand how to get to where they were. And I think in a way, what I'm getting at is I'm saying just be part of whatever community it is that you want to, if you were thinking about doing online courses, you need to start building community.
Yeah, look, and I'm not trying to I'm way more agreeing with you than not, because I am an expert in helping beginners get to competency on the piano. But the only reason I'm an expert is is because I started putting out content in that area. I made a course in that area and actually got people results in that area. Right. And that's where my expertise comes in today, even though I'm not some world famous concert pianist or anything like that.
Sure. And there are brewers out there who are super talented and know a ton about beer who are not, Cicerones, right? There are people in the business who don't have the Cicerone certification who could teach all kinds of stuff, who know more than I do about their particular area of expertise. I guess what I'm getting at is I feel like I see a lot of when I look on social media and I see reels and I see that kind of like flash in the pan stuff, I see a lot of people who kind of seem like they're full of it. And I guess I'm just saying, don't be one of those people. Just be humble, join, be part of your community, start learning, start leveling up. And then you can, I don't know. I see you looking at me funny. I don't know if you're total agreement with me, but I do think that that's just important. You build expertise over time, and that is something you should strive to do, especially if you want to teach other people.
So look, I do agree with you. In the past 6 months or so, I've been on a health kick, and I haven't drank much of anything alcohol wise. And so I'm over a half a beer in, man, and I feel it. And so that's what the look was from. It's just probably this beer that I've got here.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I think it all comes back around to being consistent, creating content that involves engaging with your community. And I think that works best with podcasts and long form stuff. That's my take.
Yeah. Look, I mean, you're not going to get an argument from me here, because one of the best decisions I've ever made, including anything I did with piano, was creating this very podcast. Just the doors that it opened, the intimacy that it creates for the listener and the trust that it builds up. is unlike anything I've ever experienced. And you mentioned it can take a while to get any traction, and that was certainly the case for me. Right? Nobody was listening to those first dozens of episodes.
Yeah.
But fortunately I was able to, be consistent, not give up, and it's been incredible having a podcast.
Yeah. The one I just launched, I call it Meet a Cicerone. And I identified this problem in the market, which is there are a lot of people out there who are like, why would I do that? It sounds expensive. It sounds time consuming. How's it going to help me? I'm just not really sure. It's not like I met some other Cicerone who has the job I want or something, like you said, like you're asking, like Cicerone, a job title. It's not. It's just something that'll help you with your career. So I thought, well, geez, why don't I just sit down with other Cicerones and just talk shop? Like, why'd you do it? How are you applying the things you've learned? Is it helping you in your career? How, kind of like this podcast, right? You're just sitting down with people in the biz and having these conversations that can be really helpful to folks out there who are thinking about doing what we do. And it's the same thing when I do these Meet a Cicerone podcast episodes. Folks are getting that information that they're looking for about beer and about these exams and about why they should do it. And the reason I even brought that up actually is I've only done a few episodes already, and I have already met all these people in the beer industry that I've always wanted to meet, but just had no reason to hit them up.
I love that.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, there's this guy that everyone has for literal years been telling me that I look like. This dude, Aaron. He lives in South Carolina. I saw him on the floor at the Great American Beer Festival, which is this huge festival in Colorado, in Denver. It's like a big deal if you get asked to judge it. I've gotten asked to judge it a couple times. So I was there because I had judged it. And I'm like walking across the floor and I see this guy and I'm like, oh my God, that's that guy everyone always tells me about. So we talked for 30 seconds because it's like mayhem at this beer festival. But I reached back out to him the other day and ended up just having the most lovely podcast conversation with this dude and connecting with him. And it just made me realize wow, this is going to be amazing for me just to get to know people in the industry.
No doubt. That's certainly one of the main side benefits to having a podcast too.
Yeah.
Is the networking ability. You would reach out to people with that platform that, right. You wouldn't otherwise.
And you're just
so I'm glad you've
shop.
noticed that as well. Yeah, exactly.
Talking shop. It's this is easy. I could do this all day.
Yeah. I've had some bigger name guests on that, I probably would have never had the opportunity to speak with. Right. And not that this is a massive podcast either,
Right.
But
it's very focused and very nichey, and
yep.
That I think that really works. When you're super niche down, people know exactly what they're getting into when they come to talk to you, right?
Yeah. No doubt.
Talking shop.
Well, Chris, thanks for talking shop with me here a little bit today. Sharing a beer here.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Taking
Congrats.
a break from your health tip. I've been doing some lifting myself lately. A little more than usual. Yeah.
Hopefully 2/3 of a beer doesn't knock me off too bad.
Yeah. I think you'll be okay. Let me just say, I already mentioned it, but if I had not enrolled in your coaching program, I would have stopped doing this about probably 8 months ago or so, and just gotten a normal job. And my year in your coaching program ended 4 months ago, right? You sign on for a year. I stayed on. I mean, I think it's super valuable. I just want to end this by giving you a testimonial, Jacques. I really do, because I feel like I owe you for really helping me make this thing work. And, I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about the future of Beer Scholar. And I really see it going places. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be doing it. I definitely don't think that I would be in this place without all your advice. So thank you.
That is very generous and kind. I'm not sure, to the extent it's quite true, but you're a real asset to have inside the group for sure. And it's great that you've chosen to even stick around longer than the year too. So I always enjoy when you show up to the calls and whatnot. And I appreciate you doing this, man. It's been a pleasure. And congrats on all the success. I mean, if there is anybody out there that wants to dive into some of this, I'm sure there's plenty of beer connoisseurs out there, and make sure you tell people about, where to find the podcast, what, pitch the website, and anything else, how they could connect with you and your material online.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. Yeah. I do end up with plenty of students who are like literally just in it for fun. I did it for fun at first, so I get that. I'm at thebeerscholar.com, and that is my handle on all social media. That's my website. If you want to find me anywhere, you can just Google Beer Scholar and you'll find me. I'm the only game in town.
Right on. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Thank you, Jacques.
Thanks out there for listening to episode 226 of the Online Course Show. As Chris mentioned, he is a member of my coaching program. Specifically, he's in my Next Level Coaching program, which is for course creators who are established and making some sales, but are looking to scale and take things to the next level. To learn more about that program, head to oc.show/nextlevel. That's oc.show/nextlevel. For the notes and links from today's episode, head to oc.show/226. And once again, Chris's website is thebeerscholar.com. Maybe you love beer and are interested in passing the exam that we talked about here. Definitely check him out. That's going to do it for this one. Don't forget to take action on what you heard today. I'm rooting for you.